The wealthy investor discovered the exhausted young woman giving away the only meal she had to a frightened little boy. What happened next was unbelievable. She had no idea the stranger quietly watching from the other side of the street already knew something about her future. And he wasn't there by accident. By sunrise, the city was already alive. Traffic crawled through downtown Chicago while coffee shops filled with professionals clutching expensive cups and expensive dreams. Most people hurried past one another without making eye contact, too busy chasing deadlines to notice the invisible people around them. Emma Brooks had become one of those invisible people. At 26 years old, she carried everything she owned inside a faded navy blue backpack. Every morning she folded the blanket she slept under at the women's shelter before leaving before dawn, making room for the next person who would need it that evening. Her clothes were always clean, even if they were worn. Her shoes had been repaired so many times that the stitching looked like tiny scars running across the leather. She never complained. Instead, she smiled. Every morning she stopped outside the public library before it opened. Not because she wanted somewhere warm. Because she wanted to learn. She borrowed books about business, architecture, finance, psychology, and leadership. She filled old notebooks with ideas for companies she dreamed of building one day. Years earlier, Emma had been a university student with scholarships and big ambitions. But after both of her parents died within 18 months of each other, medical debt swallowed everything. Tuition disappeared. Their family home was sold. Friends slowly drifted away. Life became less about dreams and more about surviving another day. Still, every page she read reminded her of something her father used to tell her. Your circumstances are temporary. Your character is permanent. Those words became the foundation she refused to abandon. Every afternoon she volunteered 2 hours at a neighborhood soup kitchen. Nobody paid her. Nobody asked her to come. She simply believed that if kindness disappeared from her life, she would become someone she no longer recognized. The volunteers loved her. Children followed her around because she remembered every name. Elderly guests saved seats beside her because she always listened without rushing them. One volunteer once asked why she spent time helping others when she clearly needed help herself. Emma simply smiled. Pain makes two kinds of people, she replied softly. People who close their hearts, and people who understand why they should never close them. Those words stayed with everyone who heard them. That afternoon, heavy rain began falling across the city. The shelter had run out of umbrellas. Emma pulled her jacket tighter and walked toward the train station where a local charity distributed box dinners every Thursday evening. The line stretched halfway around the block. By the time she finally reached the front, there was only one meal remaining. She accepted it with grateful hands. The volunteer apologized. I'm sorry, sweetheart. That's the last one. Emma smiled anyway. It's enough. She had barely walked 50 feet before hearing quiet crying. Near a bus stop sat a little boy, maybe 8 years old. His clothes were soaked. His backpack looked almost bigger than he was. No adult stood nearby. Emma slowly approached. Hey there. The boy quickly wiped away his tears. I'm okay. She knelt to his eye level. No one cries like that because they're okay. After several quiet moments, he whispered. I got lost. His grandmother had become separated from him during the rain while trying to catch a bus. He hadn't eaten since breakfast. Emma looked down at the warm meal in her hands. She hadn't eaten all day either. Her stomach reminded her of that fact immediately. She looked back at the child. Without hesitation, she handed him the dinner. His eyes widened. But, what about you? She smiled. I'm older. He frowned. That doesn't mean you don't get hungry. Emma laughed gently. Maybe. She placed the meal into his small hands anyway. It means I know you'll need it more tonight. The little boy hugged the box tightly. Before she could stand again, an older woman came running through the rain. "There you are." The grandmother wrapped the child in her arms before turning toward Emma with tears in her eyes. Thank you so much." Emma simply nodded. "I'm glad he's safe." She quietly walked away before either of them could notice she now had nothing for herself. Across the street, a black luxury sedan remained parked beneath the trees. Inside sat Daniel Whitmore, one of the city's most respected investors. A man whose companies employed thousands. He had witnessed everything. Not from beginning to end by coincidence, but because he had been watching Emma for several days. Not in a threatening way. In a curious one. His late wife had spent years helping struggling young people rebuild their lives. Before she passed away, she left Daniel one unusual request. Every year, find one person the world has overlooked. He had honored that promise every year since. Most applicants came through charities. Emma never had. She wasn't asking anyone for help. Which made what he had just witnessed impossible to ignore. Daniel quietly whispered to himself. She gave away the only thing she had. His driver looked through the windshield. Should I call someone? Daniel slowly shook his head. No. He continued watching Emma disappear into the rain. I think I've finally found her. Before we continue with this incredible journey, I spent countless hours researching and crafting this story to bring you something truly meaningful. If stories like this touch your heart and you want to see more acts of kindness that restore faith in humanity, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. It means the world to me and helps these important stories reach others who need to hear them. Now, let's see what happens next. Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that completely changed your perspective? Share your story in the comments below. The next morning, Emma arrived at the public library 15 minutes before it opened. The rain had stopped, but the sidewalk still glistened under the early sunlight. Office workers hurried past her with briefcases and headphones, while delivery trucks unloaded supplies for nearby businesses. Emma adjusted the straps on her faded backpack and waited patiently. As soon as the doors opened, she headed toward her favorite corner on the second floor. It overlooked the city skyline. To everyone else, it was simply a quiet reading area. To Emma, it was where her future still felt possible. She spread out several borrowed books, one on entrepreneurship, another on commercial real estate, and a notebook filled with pages of handwritten business ideas. One page was titled, Community Cafe, Every Meal Funds Another. Another read, Affordable Housing Through Private Partnerships. She wasn't just dreaming. She was planning. Even if no one else believed those plans would ever leave the pages. As she quietly sketched another idea, an elderly librarian walked by. Good morning, Emma. She smiled warmly. Morning, Mrs. Collins. Mrs. Collins glanced at the stack of books. You've nearly finished another 5 already. Emma laughed softly. They're due tomorrow. You know, Mrs. Collins said, I've worked here for 30 years. I've seen students preparing for exams, executives studying for promotions, and retirees learning new hobbies. She paused. But I've never seen someone study as if every page might change their life. Emma closed her notebook. Maybe one will. Mrs. Collins smiled. I think it already has. Across town, Daniel Whitmore stood inside the conference room of Whitmore Capital. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Executives discussed acquisitions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But Daniel wasn't listening. His thoughts kept returning to the young woman who had given away her only meal. One executive finally noticed. Mr. Whitmore. Daniel blinked. I'm sorry. You seem distracted. He looked toward the skyline. I met someone yesterday. The room exchanged curious glances. A potential client, someone asked. Daniel smiled. No. A teacher. The executives looked confused. But I don't think she knows she's teaching anyone. Later that afternoon, Daniel visited the neighborhood soup kitchen where Emma volunteered. He wore simple clothes instead of his usual tailored suits. No security. No assistants. Just a baseball cap and a light jacket. The kitchen buzzed with activity. Children laughed. Volunteers carried trays. The smell of fresh soup filled the room. Daniel quietly observed from the back. Emma moved from table to table, helping everyone before helping herself. An elderly man struggled to carry his tray. She immediately took it for him. A young mother couldn't calm her crying toddler. Emma knelt beside the child, made a funny face, and within seconds the little girl burst into laughter. One volunteer accidentally dropped an entire container of bread. Without hesitation, Emma helped clean the mess while reassuring the embarrassed volunteer. It's okay. We've all had days like this. Not once did she complain. Not once did she draw attention to herself. She simply served. Daniel watched carefully. Kindness performed once could be coincidence. Kindness repeated over and over. That revealed character. After lunch, Emma stepped outside to catch her breath. Daniel followed. Keeping a respectful distance, he spoke. Excuse me. She turned. Yes. I saw how you handled everything inside. She smiled politely. Everyone helps. Not like you. Emma looked slightly uncomfortable. I'm just doing what anyone should. Daniel extended his hand. My name is Daniel. She shook it. Emma. Do you volunteer here every week? 3 afternoons. Why? She looked surprised by the question. Because someone once helped me. Daniel waited. She continued. When my parents passed away. Her voice caught for just a moment. Our neighbors brought meals every evening for almost 2 months. She smiled faintly. They probably don't remember doing it. But I do. So now. She looked back toward the kitchen. I try to become someone other people remember. Daniel remained silent. There was no self-pity in her voice. No bitterness. Only gratitude. He admired that. Before leaving, Daniel noticed Emma collecting leftover bread that volunteers were allowed to take home. The amount was small. Barely enough for one meal. He approached the kitchen manager. Quietly. Without Emma hearing. Does she come here because she needs food? The manager sighed. She never asks. But yes. Sometimes it's the only meal she gets. Daniel looked toward Emma again. She was laughing with one of the children. No one watching her would ever guess how difficult her own life was. The manager continued. She spends more time encouraging people than talking about herself. Truthfully. I worry about her. The next morning, Emma was surprised to find someone waiting outside the library. It was Daniel. Holding 2 paper coffee cups and a small bakery bag. She looked puzzled. I hope this isn't strange, he said. I remembered you mentioning you study here. Emma hesitated. You remembered? I did. He held out the bag. I thought you might not have had breakfast. Emma instinctively stepped back. Oh. I couldn't. Why not? She lowered her eyes. I don't like accepting things I haven't earned. Daniel smiled gently. Fair enough. He thought for a second. I need help choosing books for someone who wants to learn about business. She looked curious. You. Let's pretend. If you help me. I'll consider breakfast your consulting fee. Emma couldn't help laughing. That's a clever argument. So. She finally accepted the bag. I suppose that makes this a business transaction. Exactly. They sat together near the library windows. Emma recommended books. Not expensive textbooks. Accessible ones. Books that taught principles instead of shortcuts. Daniel listened carefully. Occasionally asking questions he already knew the answers to. Not to test her, but to hear how she thought. Her answers weren't filled with jargon. They were practical. Compassionate. Unexpected. Businesses succeed, she said, when they solve problems people actually have. Daniel nodded. And profit? It's important. She smiled. But if profit becomes more important than people, you'll eventually lose both. Daniel leaned back. His late wife had once said almost those exact words. For a brief moment, emotion crossed his face. Emma noticed. Did I say something wrong? He shook his head. No. You reminded me of someone I miss. There was a quiet silence between them. Not awkward. Comfortable. Human. Before they parted ways, Daniel handed Emma a simple business card. No flashy title. Just his name and phone number. If you ever need advice. Or someone to look over those business ideas in your notebook. He smiled. I'd be honored. Emma looked at the card. Most people don't offer help to strangers. Daniel answered softly. Maybe that's because they haven't met the right stranger. Emma smiled. For what it's worth. Thank you. She slipped the card carefully into her notebook, not because she expected to use it, but because, for the first time in a very long while, someone had looked at her and seen more than her circumstances. Someone had seen her potential. Neither of them realized it yet. But that small breakfast, shared over borrowed books and honest conversation, would become the first step in a journey that would transform both of their lives forever. Over the next several weeks, an unexpected routine began to form. Every Tuesday and Friday morning, Daniel found himself stopping by the public library before heading to his office. Sometimes he brought coffee. Sometimes fresh fruit. Other times, he brought nothing at all. Emma had made one condition clear after their first breakfast. If we're going to keep meeting, she had said with a smile, I don't want charity. Daniel had nodded. Then what do you want? She thought for a moment. Honest conversations. That was an agreement he was more than happy to make. Their meetings quickly became something both of them looked forward to. Daniel never introduced himself as one of the city's wealthiest investors. To Emma, he was simply a thoughtful businessman with a remarkable ability to ask meaningful questions. What problem would you solve first if someone handed you $1 million? He asked one morning. Emma didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared out the library window at people walking below. Loneliness. Daniel blinked. Not poverty. Poverty matters. She nodded. But loneliness makes people invisible. She pointed toward the sidewalk. Look at everyone down there. They're walking past hundreds of people without really seeing them. If I could build something, I'd build places where people feel noticed. Daniel smiled quietly. You think differently. Emma shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe I just know what it feels like not to be seen. Those words stayed with Daniel for the rest of the day. At the soup kitchen, the volunteers began noticing the changes in Emma. Not because she suddenly looked wealthier. She didn't. She still wore the same repaired shoes. She still carried the same faded backpack. But something about her had changed. She laughed more. She stood a little taller. Hope had begun replacing exhaustion. One afternoon, Mrs. Hernandez, the kitchen director, pulled Emma aside. You've been smiling a lot lately. Emma laughed. Is that a complaint? No. Mrs. Hernandez smiled back. I'm just curious. Emma hesitated. I made a new friend. Mrs. Hernandez raised an eyebrow. The gentleman who keeps stopping by. Emma looked surprised. You noticed? Honey. She laughed. The whole kitchen noticed. Emma blushed. It's not like that. We just talk. Mrs. Hernandez studied her for a moment. Just be careful. There are good people in this world. But there are also people who make promises they never intend to keep. Emma nodded slowly. I know. And that's why I'm taking my time. Meanwhile, Daniel's daughter, Olivia, wasn't nearly as enthusiastic. She had recently returned from New York after taking a leadership role in one of the family's companies. When Daniel mentioned Emma during dinner, Olivia frowned. You met her where? At a soup kitchen. And now you're meeting her twice a week? Daniel calmly buttered a piece of bread. Yes. Olivia exchanged a concerned look with the family's longtime attorney, Richard, who had joined them for dinner. Dad. You've built an empire. You can't just trust strangers. Daniel looked at her. I'm not trusting a stranger. I'm learning about a person. Richard cleared his throat. With respect. There are people who become very convincing when they realize someone has money. Daniel smiled. Exactly. And that's why she still doesn't know I have any. The room fell silent. Olivia sighed. I just don't want someone taking advantage of you. Daniel reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. I appreciate that. But sometimes. The greatest risk isn't trusting the wrong person. It's overlooking the right one. A month later, Daniel finally asked to see Emma's notebook. She hesitated before handing it over. I should warn you. It's messy. He opened the first page. Then the second. Then the third. Page after page contained business plans, financial projections, sketches of community centers, cafes, housing projects, scholarship programs, and employment ideas. Everything was handwritten. Everything was researched. Every margin was filled with notes. Daniel looked genuinely astonished. You did all this? Emma nodded. Mostly at night. When everyone else at the shelter is asleep. He continued turning pages. This is remarkable. She smiled awkwardly. It's just ideas. No. He looked directly at her. It's strategy. For the first time in years. Someone wasn't complimenting her kindness. Someone was recognizing her mind. She felt tears forming before she quickly looked away. My father used to say. She swallowed hard. That ideas don't care where you come from. Daniel closed the notebook gently. He was right. A week later, Daniel arranged something Emma never expected. Without revealing his identity, he invited her to attend a free entrepreneurship workshop sponsored by one of his foundations. It'll be good networking, he said casually. You should go. Emma almost declined. I don't really own clothes for events like that. Daniel smiled. Neither do ideas. They're welcome anyway. After much convincing, she agreed. The conference hall was unlike anything she'd experienced in years. People wore tailored suits. Expensive watches. Designer handbags. Emma stood near the entrance, suddenly feeling out of place. Maybe this had been a mistake. As conversations buzzed around her, she overheard two attendees whispering. Is she lost? I think this event is invitation only. Maybe she's here for the catering staff. Emma pretended not to hear. But every word landed heavily. She quietly turned toward the exit. Before she could leave, Daniel appeared beside her. I'm glad you came. She forced a smile. I don't think I belong here. He looked around the room. Tell me. How many people here do you think have actually built something meaningful? Emma looked confused. I don't know. Neither do I. He smiled. But I know one person who has. She frowned. Who? He gently tapped her notebook. You. She looked down. It's only paper. No. He replied softly. It's proof you refuse to stop dreaming. Those words gave her just enough courage to stay. The workshop ended with participants presenting business ideas in small groups. Emma reluctantly shared one of hers. A community cafe that trained homeless individuals, provided affordable meals, and reinvested profits into transitional housing. When she finished, the room was silent. Not because they disliked it. Because they were genuinely impressed. Several participants applauded. One mentor even said, "That's one of the most socially sustainable business models I've heard today." Emma smiled for the first time all evening. Maybe. Just maybe. She belonged after all. But the following morning, everything changed. Emma returned to the women's shelter to find her belongings packed into cardboard boxes. The shelter director looked heartbroken. I'm so sorry. The city inspected the building yesterday. There were structural issues. We've been ordered to close immediately. Emma stared at the boxes. Close. The director nodded. We have 72 hours. We don't know where everyone will go. The room suddenly felt smaller. Heavier. Around her, women quietly cried as volunteers tried to organize emergency transportation. Emma picked up her backpack without saying a word. That evening, she sat alone on a park bench, clutching the notebook that contained every dream she still had left. The future she had only just begun to believe in suddenly seemed to disappear all over again. When Daniel arrived for their usual meeting the next morning, she wasn't at the library. Neither the next day. Nor the day after that. For the first time since they met. He had no idea where she was. And for the first time in weeks. Emma began wondering if hope had only been something she had borrowed, something life had now come to take back. Daniel stood outside the library for nearly 20 minutes. Emma had never missed one of their meetings. Not once. He stepped inside and found Mrs. Collins organizing returned books. Good morning, he said. Have you seen Emma? The librarian's warm expression faded. You don't know. His heart sank. Know what? Mrs. Collins explained everything. The shelter had been closed after a city inspection. The residents had only a few days to leave. No one knew where most of them had gone. Daniel thanked her and walked back outside in silence. For the first time in years, he felt helpless. His driver approached carefully. Sir. Daniel looked toward the skyline. Find every temporary shelter in the city. Every church. Every outreach center. We're looking for someone. 3 days passed. Then 5. Daniel searched everywhere he could without violating Emma's dignity. He refused to treat her like a project. She deserved better than that. On the 6th day, he finally found her. Not in a shelter. Not in a park. She was back at the neighborhood soup kitchen. Only this time. She wasn't serving meals. She was helping volunteers unload donated blankets from a delivery truck. Despite sleeping wherever she could find space, despite carrying everything she owned once again. She was still helping other people. Daniel walked toward her. Emma. She turned. For a brief moment, relief washed across her face. Then she quickly tried to hide it. I've been wondering where you disappeared to, he said gently. She looked down. I didn't disappear. I just. She searched for the right words. Didn't know how to explain. Daniel glanced at the backpack resting beside her. You've been sleeping wherever you can, haven't you? Emma remained silent. Silence was answer enough. I didn't want you to see me like this. He looked at her with quiet compassion. Emma. I've never seen you as your circumstances. Tears filled her eyes. I was finally starting to believe things could change. She laughed sadly. And then life reminded me who I am. Daniel shook his head. No. Life reminded you where you are. Those are not the same thing. She looked at him, surprised. You are not homeless. You are a woman without a home. There's a difference. You are not hopeless. You are carrying hope for dozens of people every single day. And one setback doesn't erase who you've become. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel asked the question that would change everything. Emma. If someone believed in your dream, would you still have the courage to build it? She answered without hesitation. Every single day. The following morning, Daniel invited Emma to his office. She almost declined. I don't think I'm dressed appropriately. He smiled over the phone. I've learned something about you. You're always appropriately dressed for honesty. She laughed. That's a strange compliment. It's also true. When Emma arrived at the towering glass building downtown, she froze. The receptionist greeted her warmly. Mr. Whitmore is expecting you. Whitmore? The name sounded familiar. She stepped into the private elevator. When the doors opened, framed magazine covers lined the hallway. Each featured the same face. Daniel. One of America's most influential investors. The billionaire building businesses that change communities. Emma stopped walking. Her hands began trembling. No. She whispered. This can't be. The office doors opened. Daniel stood waiting. Not behind a massive desk. But near the window. Just as he had sat beside her in the library. You didn't tell me. His expression was calm. You never asked. Emma looked around the office. You own this building? I do. And, the workshop? Yes. The foundation? Yes. She stared at him in disbelief. So every conversation was real. He answered before she could finish. Every single one. You never pitied me. Never. You never tested me. No. I listened. Emma sat down slowly. I don't understand. Daniel opened a small wooden box resting on the table. Inside was an old photograph. A smiling woman stood beside him. My wife. Her name was Catherine. Emma gently picked up the picture. She looks kind. She was. Daniel smiled softly. Before she passed away, she asked me to do one thing. Every year. Find someone the world has overlooked. He looked directly into Emma's eyes. I wasn't looking for someone talented. I wasn't looking for someone successful. I was looking for someone whose character stayed intact after life became unfair. He paused. I found you. Emma quietly wiped away tears. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I have a proposal. He slid her notebook across the table. She frowned. My notebook. I've read every page. And I'd like to invest in it. Emma stared at him. You mean? I mean your community cafe. The employment program. The housing partnerships. The scholarship fund. I want to help build every one of them. She looked stunned. Why me? Daniel smiled. Because money builds buildings. But character builds legacies. 6 months later. The old warehouse on the west side of Chicago had been transformed. Fresh brickwork. Large windows. Warm lighting. A sign above the entrance read, "The next chapter Community Cafe." Below it were smaller words. "Every meal helps someone begin again." Emma stood at the entrance, greeting customers. Nearly half the employees had once experienced homelessness themselves. Others had aged out of foster care. Several were single parents rebuilding their lives. Every employee received professional training, financial education, and career coaching. People weren't being rescued. They were being equipped. Mrs. Collins from the library arrived carrying flowers. Mrs. Hernandez came with the entire soup kitchen staff. Even the little boy Emma had fed months earlier walked through the doors holding his grandmother's hand. He ran straight toward her. "I remember you." Emma knelt and hugged him. "I remember you too." His grandmother smiled through tears. "You changed our lives that day." Emma shook her head. "No. We changed each other's." 1 year later, a young woman stepped nervously into the cafe. She carried an old backpack. Her clothes were clean but worn. She quietly asked if there were any job openings. Several customers barely noticed her. Emma did. She walked over with a warm smile. "Would you like to sit down first?" The young woman looked embarrassed. "I haven't eaten today." Emma smiled knowingly. "Then let's fix that." She personally carried over a hot meal. The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "I don't have any money." Emma gently pushed the plate toward her. "I know." Years earlier, someone had looked beyond her circumstances. Now, she was doing the same for someone else. Daniel watched from a nearby table, saying nothing. He didn't need to. The promise he had made to his late wife had grown into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. One act of kindness had become dozens. Then hundreds. Soon, thousands. Lives once defined by survival were now filled with opportunity, dignity, and hope. Emma finally understood what the mysterious stranger had seen in her from the very beginning. He hadn't known every detail of her future. He had simply recognized the kind of person capable of creating one worth believing in. This story shows how one act of kindness can change everything. What's one way you could make a difference in someone's life today? Challenge yourself and share your commitment in the comments. 3 years later, very little about Emma's life looked the same. But everything that mattered still did. She still arrived before sunrise. She still greeted every employee by name. She still believed that listening to someone was just as valuable as serving them a meal. The only difference was that she now unlocked the front door instead of waiting outside one. The next chapter Community Cafe had grown far beyond anyone's expectations. The original location had become the heart of the neighborhood. A second cafe opened across the city. Then a third. Each one followed the same simple promise. Every meal purchased helped fund job training, temporary housing assistance, and scholarships for people rebuilding their lives. The cafes didn't just serve food. They restored confidence. They became places where people stopped feeling invisible. On one wall inside every location hung a simple wooden sign. It read, "Everyone who walks through these doors deserves dignity before they deserve judgment." Customers often stopped to read it. Many quietly wiped away tears. The employment program Emma had once sketched in a worn notebook had become one of the city's most respected community initiatives. People who had struggled with homelessness learned culinary skills, customer service, bookkeeping, marketing, and leadership. Many eventually started businesses of their own. Others became restaurant managers, teachers, social workers, and entrepreneurs. Every graduation ceremony ended the same way. Emma stood before the graduates and said, "Never believe that your hardest chapter is your whole story. You are living proof that people can begin again." The room always erupted in applause. Not because the words were inspiring. Because everyone there had lived them. Daniel Whitmore also changed. His friends noticed it first. For years, they had known him as a brilliant businessman. Now they knew him as something else. A happier man. His office walls, once covered with financial awards and business achievements, slowly filled with photographs instead. Employees graduating from the cafe program. Families moving into permanent housing. Children receiving scholarship certificates. Community celebrations. When visitors asked which accomplishment made him proudest, he never pointed toward a business award. Instead, he pointed toward a photograph of Emma laughing with her team during the cafe's grand opening. This, he would say. This is the best investment I ever made. His assistant once smiled and replied. I doubt it's your most profitable. Daniel laughed. It depends on how you define profit. Olivia changed too. The daughter who had once worried her father was being taken advantage of had become one of Emma's strongest supporters. In fact, she apologized not long after the cafe opened. The two women sat together after closing time. Olivia looked embarrassed. I owe you an apology. Emma smiled gently. For what? I judged you before I knew you. Emma shook her head. You were protecting your father. I understand. No. Olivia replied. I saw your circumstances. My father saw your character. I've been trying to learn the difference ever since. From that day forward, the two women worked side by side. Together, they expanded the scholarship program, creating opportunities for young adults who had aged out of foster care and students forced to leave college because of financial hardship. Every scholarship recipient received more than tuition assistance. They received mentors. Because Emma never forgot how lonely rebuilding a life could feel. Mrs. Collins finally retired from the public library. On her last day, Emma surprised her with something she never expected. The library's new entrepreneurship and community leadership reading room. Its shelves were filled with hundreds of books. Above the entrance hung another plaque. The Collins Learning Corner. Mrs. Collins covered her mouth in disbelief. You named this after me? Emma smiled. You gave me something priceless. You never made me feel out of place. Mrs. Collins embraced her tightly. I only did something small. Emma whispered. Small things become big things when they arrive at the right moment. Mrs. Hernandez continued running the soup kitchen. Only now, every week, fresh meals arrived from the Next Chapter Community Cafe. Completely free. No announcements. No cameras. No publicity. Just quiet generosity. One afternoon, Mrs. Hernandez called Emma. You know people would donate more if they knew this was coming from your organization. Emma smiled. That's not why we do it. Mrs. Hernandez laughed. I figured you'd say that. One chilly autumn evening, Emma took a familiar walk through downtown Chicago. She stopped near the same bus stop where years earlier she had handed her only meal to a frightened little boy. So much had changed. Yet the memory remained as vivid as ever. She closed her eyes for a moment. If she had chosen differently that day. If fear had been louder than compassion. If she had convinced herself that she had too little to share. None of this would have happened. A quiet voice interrupted her thoughts. Excuse me. She turned. An elderly man sat alone on a nearby bench. He looked tired. Lost. Emma walked over. Good evening. He smiled weakly. I missed the shelter check-in. She sat beside him. I know someone who can help. She made a phone call. Within minutes, transportation was arranged, a warm meal was waiting, and temporary accommodation had been secured. As the van drove away, Emma smiled to herself. Years ago. She had prayed for someone to see her future. Now. She spent her days helping others believe in theirs. Before Daniel retired, he visited the cafe one last time as chairman of Whitmore Capital. Emma brought him his favorite cup of coffee. Neither of them spoke for a while. They simply watched employees serving customers. Laughter filled the room. Children played near the reading corner. Fresh bread came out of the ovens. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Do you remember the first thing I ever saw you do?" Emma smiled. "I gave away my dinner." "You did?" He nodded. "I thought I was witnessing generosity." He paused. "I was actually witnessing leadership." Emma looked at him. "You changed my life." Daniel smiled warmly. "No. I simply opened a door. You were the one who had the courage to walk through it." They quietly raised their coffee cups. Not to celebrate success, but to celebrate something far more valuable. A life lived with purpose. Stories like this remind us that extraordinary kindness exists all around us. If this touched your heart, please like this video, it helps more people discover these inspiring stories. Subscribe for more tales of human kindness that will restore your faith in humanity. And most importantly, look for opportunities in your own life to be someone's unexpected blessing. You never know how a single encouraging word, a shared meal, or a simple act of compassion might change the course of someone's future. What act of kindness will you perform this week? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and remember, you have the power to change someone's entire world. Sometimes, the stranger you choose to help today isn't just someone crossing your path. Sometimes, they're the beginning of your own future too.